All right. Hey, what's poppin', everyone? Welcome back to another Solutions Architect Associate video. In today's video, I have taken the Solution Architect Associate after 4 years later, and it's gotten more complex. So I thought I would talk about it, give you some tips and tricks, maybe how you can get it yourself. Because I know when I was going and studying for these certifications like several years ago, I guess they were initially expired. I got 6 of them at the time, but now I thought I'd share you some tips so you can help you out. I took some notes on how you can do it, things that have changed over the years, because things have changed definitely since the first time I took it initially, like 4 years ago. I don't even remember when, but since this was like my most Solutions Architect Associate was my most popular video, I thought I'd make it again, even though I haven't really made our AWS certification video in a long time. So make sure to triple click that like button, and let's get. All right, so let's just get directly into it. So S3 object blocked. I don't remember this existing 3 years ago. So store using a write once, read many times, kind of like architecture, or worm, if you think of that. So if you think of this object block, think of worm. So basically, you can write once to this S3 table, and then you can read as many times as you want, but you can't write again. There's governance mode, in which you use to access to delete or alter basically anything in the S3 table. There's compliance, so this is another mode. So no users can alter objects on the table. And then there's a legal hold, which prevents an object from being overwritten or deleted. So, think of legal, like, if you break the law, you're going to jail. Okay, so X3 replication can replicate from one bucket to another. And remember, buckets are global at a scale. So versioning must be enabled for this to happen. So for an existing bucket, it's not updated automatically. You need to update it as you go. And delete markers are not replicated by default. So you might need to change that as well. All right. Next topic, vCenter and VMware, right? So these run on dedicated hosts, and you can deploy vCenter on the AWS cloud using VMware. That's basically all you really need to know about that. So EBS, if the root device volume is terminated, the volume will also be terminated. So this is kind of like a tricky thing. So like EBS kind of stores data, right? So if that reduced site volume is deleted, then you like whatever underlying storage will also be deleted. So EBS hibernation. So this is an interesting one. So it preserves the in-memory RAM, so random access memory, much faster to boot up. So EBS hibernation will just make it faster. So EFS, managed network file system. So this is encryption at rest using KMS, which is KMS, if you do not know, is key management system. So I'm kind of going through this a little bit fast because there's a lot to cover, and I can't cover like a million things. This video will be like 5 hours long. So you can always like look these things up as I talk about them. So FSX, this did not exist 3 years ago. Well, maybe it did, but it was not covered on the exams. And these were kind of the things that I really noticed on the exam. Of course, I'm not going to cover like exam questions or anything like that because I could lose my certification if they ever find out who I am. So FSX, native Windows file system on Windows Server. So if you want to think of like Windows, I'm trying to make a comparison. So FSX is just think of Windows, easy. Then there's FSX for Lustre. This is kind of like for more compute-intensive architectures. So with AI and machine learning. So one way you can think of this for Lustre, think of lusting for something, you lust for that AI and machine learning. All right, it's a really bad example, but it is an example. AWS backup. So it can back up multiple servers across multiple accounts. That's kind of straightforward. It's in the name. You can use AWS organizations in conjunction with it. So most of the time you can use other AWS services in conjunction with other AWS services. It's pretty straightforward, right? Amazon Document DB. So this allows you to run MongoDB workloads on the cloud. Okay, those are a lot of words right there. But I guess the one thing you can take away between Document DB and MongoDB, they both have the name DB in the name, right? So you can use MongoDB or you can move this MongoDB using the DB migration service if you ever need to do that. And also has DB migration service also has the word DB in it. Might help you out. Apache Cassandra, this database that uses NoSQL, so not SQL. Big data. So I guess when I took the big data certification years ago, I guess that's not even around anymore. So I guess there's no relevant there. But Cassandra, think of a girl's name, not SQL. I don't know. Maybe something could come up there when you remember that. Key spaces, fully managed Cassandra, right? So that's serverless and used for migrating Cassandra to AWS. So how can you remember key spaces? Because that doesn't really, when you think of key spaces, you don't really think of Cassandra as a database. It doesn't really add up. But maybe you can think of the key to a girl's heart, which is Cassandra, is serverless. All right, there you go. Remember that one. Graph databases in AWS. So there's Neptune, right? So Neptune is a reliable graph database service by AWS. You can build connections with it and detect fraud patterns. So when you think of Neptune, what do you think of? You think of the planet, right? And what do planets have? Well, planets are in a graph, right? They're in a circular graph around the solar system. So Neptune is one of those graph database services. There you go. And it can help you detect fraud patterns because all the fraudsters are going to Neptune to do their fraud on their graph. All right, Quantum Ledger DB. So this is a fully managed AWS Ledger DB database. So what does that mean? It means AWS take care of the ledgering and all that fun stuff. Why do they have to put quantum in there? Yeah, that's just like a buzzword, quantum. It can store financial transactions. When you ever think of financial transactions, think of the buzzword, think of the quantum. And it's immutable, NoSQL database as well. All right, next thing, time series data. So this is for Amazon Time Stream. You want to use serverless DB. So this is built for time series data. Time Stream kind of has a name in it for time series. So there you go. Private link. This is exposed to a service VPC to customer VPCs at scale. So when you think of that, you think of private link. You want to link like your service VPC to another VPC privately, but like, at scale. So you can do it however you want. You can up to 1,000 VPCs, requires a network load balancer on the service VPC. So that's just kind of like one thing you want to remember. Like these exams, they really go into detail, and you kind of have to read like the white papers to really get a full understanding of them. And you kind of have to this time around, unless you really know your stuff. Like if I was taking this again for the first time, I would probably have to read all the white papers, because I wouldn't really know all the basics without it. Cloud Hub, so it can be used to connect multiple sites that have their own VPN connection. So you can think of the hub and spoke model, right? So there's the hub of clouds, right? Like a hubcap on a tire is the way I think of that, right? And hubcap on a tire, sometimes they have like, or maybe like a bicycle tire, right? There's a hub and spoke. Have you ever seen a bicycle tire? I could show you that, but I'm not going to. It's similar to VPC peering, but kind of like everything meets in the middle of a tire, right? So it operates over the public internet, this Cloud Hub. All right, next one is Transit Gateway. So it connects VPC and on-premise networks using a central hub. So it simplifies network topology, can use route tables to limit how VPCs talk to one another. So when you think of VPCs talking to one another, you need to think of Transit Gateway, basically. I mean, it's a gateway between one VPC to another. Yeah, there you go. AWS wavelength embed storage within 5G networks. So it probably won't come up, but might. So when you think of 5G networks, you want to think of the crazy people in the 5G towers, and then AWS wavelength. Just put those together, the crazy people. So I can compute at edge using 5G, and then mobile edge computing. There you go. 5G does not have a negative impact on your brain, unless you forget it for this exam. All right, security groups. So last line of defense, virtual firewalls, by default, everything's blocked. So they're stateful, which means responses from outbound traffic, so things coming in, is allowed to flow back in. So basically what that means is if the server on AWS sends something out, it'll automatically be allowed back in by security groups, but that doesn't include the next topic, which is ACLs, which is network ACLs, or network access control links. So these are the last line of defense. So let's say the security group allows it in because it's sent out and it comes back in because it's stateful, right? But network ACL will be the last line of defense. So basically, it's associated with multiple subnets, and one subnet can be associated with one ACL at a time, and it has a list of rules. And that's the line of defense, the rules really. And it's starting at the lowest. It goes through these rules, and it will basically block or deny requests. So stateless, which means responses to allowed inbound rules are subject to the rules for outbound traffic. Excuse me. Next topic, network load balancer. So this is on layer 4. This is extremely performant. Then there's a layer 7 load balancer as well. That's the application load balancer. Then there's a classic load balancer, which is both layer 4 and layer 7. All right. Pretty straightforward there. Just think of numbers. 4 is network, 7 application. There we go. Next topic, Amazon Managed Grafana, used for querying, correlating, and visualizing metrics, logs, and traces. So this is centralized. So Grafana, when you think of Grafana, I think of a graph. Graphs are kind of good for visualizing metrics. Yeah, you can remember that, right? All right, so there's next for Prometheus. Managed service for Prometheus is on AWS. So when it's managed, what do you think of? You think of it serverless. Serverless, right? So Prometheus is a compatible service used for securely monitoring container metrics, right? When you think of Prometheus, I think of the Greek god, something Greek. So Greek, there's a service for the Greeks on Prometheus. And yeah, or the Greek god Prometheus. Is it a Greek god? I don't know. All right, next thing. Launch configurations, only for auto scaling. So you can use launch templates instead. So you want to use launch templates most of the time instead of launch configurations. There you go. But just in case you want to know, launch templates include an AMI, instance size, security group, and networking info. So AWS batch, next thing, runs batch workloads on EC2 or Fargate. So those are two kind of like ways to run these batch workloads. So when you think of batch, it's in the name, batch workloads. So it auto provisions and scales these EC2 or Fargate systems for you, so you can run your batch. There you go. Amazon MQ, so just a queue service if you ever heard of it. But kind of managed by AWS, so you don't have to worry about it. This kind of often comes up like a lot. I use Amazon MQ at my main job. So there's topic and queues. There's no default AWS integrations. And then there's RabbitMQ or Apache MQ. When you think of MQ, so all those have MQ in the word name. So pretty straightforward to draw the line there. Amazon AppFlow. So it integrates exchanging data between SaaS apps, software as a service apps. That's what SaaS apps is. Sorry, my mic fell. All right, and AWS services. So there's AWS Outposts as well. Next topic. Brings the AWS data center service to you on premise. I got so excited I bought my table there about Amazon AppFlow because it's so exciting. So integrating exchanging data. What does that mean? Between SaaS apps and services. So it kind of like helps you flow. That's what AppFlow does. Flow between, like services out and wherever, and then AWS, kind of where your home is, right? Like a river. The river flows just like the data. All right, next one, Outposts. So it brings out AWS data to you on premise. So it has racks, Outpost racks, which can have racks, like actual physical computers used in a data center. You can bring like the AWS data center racks into your on-premise data center, if that makes sense. And then there's servers, which is kind of like used for small requirements. Like you have like a small additional need for an AWS server, use AWS Outposts if you want it in your on-premise. That's the key thing there. Because when you think of Outposts, you think of something like an outpost, like back in like the old times, they would have outposts because they didn't have cars. So that like somewhere you can have home without being home, and home in this case is the AWS server, if that makes any sense to you. Deregistration delay keeps existing connections open if EC2 instances are deregistered or become unhealthy. So that makes sense. If something just becomes unhealthy, then you have that delay for you. Let me go see here. Anything more important? Yes. Okay, subnets. Let me just go through like VPC things because a lot of this exam is VPC. Subnets map to a single availability zone, must be associated with a route table and automatically associated with a main route table. And you can change your subnets. So transfer acceleration allows you to utilize all available bandwidth over the internet. So transfer, what do you think of is you just want to make things faster. Transfer acceleration is where you go. Default security group. So this is kind of a little tricky thing. They usually ask this like at least once or twice, or something related to it. So the default security group is you can't delete, but you can change the group's rules. So they'll ask you something like you create a security group. What is it going to do? Well, it's going to do something, but you can't delete it, but you can change its rules so you can make it work the way you want it to. So network firewall, so stateful firewall tracks connections and protocol IDS, prevents VPCs from accessing domains using unauthorized protocols. So that makes sense. Firewall just stops things from happening, right? And then there's the web application firewall, which is different because it protects web apps. So that's, I guess, web application comes in from attacks. So you can configure the rules that allow back and block web requests. So you can think of your web app has requests going in and out to it, and you can block those with that web application firewall, which is different from the AWS firewall. All right, security groups. You can assign up to 5 security groups to an instance. Might come up if you want to remember that number, 5 for S or SG security group. So each instance in a subnet can be assigned to a different set of security groups. All right. So Trusted Advisor helps you follow AWS best practices, gives guidance. So this kind of they try to like scam you on this one. Trusted Advisor does not do anything for you. It gives you guidance. There are other services that will automatically do things for you if you're doing something wrong. This Trusted Advisor, like, when you go to an advisor in school, it will advise you what classes to take. This one will advise you which security best practices to follow, or maybe just AWS best practices. So Amazon Forecast. So time series forecasting service. I think I mentioned that. Uses machine learning, provides business insights. Kinesis data streams, another AWS service. There's like 100, I think 200 something AWS services. Real-time streaming and data transferring service. You want to Kinesis. Yeah, I don't have a data streams. You can think of data streaming. So streaming is just going from one place to another, and transfer service. So that's kind of a way to think about it. And there's the fire hose, right? What are fire hydrants, or what do you attach to a fire hydrant? You attach to a fire hose. So all this data can come out of that fire hydrant, so it can capture, transform, and load the stream data into S3, Redshift, ES, and Splunk. The fire in this case is S3, Redshift, ES, and Splunk. It's on fire because it's so hot right now. Everyone's using it, and you want to put it out with the fire hose. That makes sense. AWS Shield, so they have so many protection services because security is going away as a certification. So now they want to add all these security questions onto the exam. So Shield, AWS Shield protects against DDoS and protects the layer 3 and 4 attacks. So you shield against like 3 and 4, which are like the arrows coming from to blot out the sky. If you've ever seen the movie 300, I think. WAF protects against application level attacks. I think I already mentioned that. Guard duty, think of guard duty like a dog. Threat detection using machine learning, AI. So think of like a machine learning robot dog, and it's protecting you from the bad people. So this is proactive, right? So this is different from Trusted Advisor, which I mentioned before, which is not proactive. Guard duty is proactive because the dogs they'll chase. If you ever had someone come to your door if you have a dog, they're gonna bark their way away and scare it off. So firewall manager centrally managed or centrally set up firewall rules across multiple accounts. So you have multiple AWS accounts. You want to manage them all. There you go. Firewall manager. Easy to remember, I guess, because managers multiple accounts, or you manage multiple people if you ever work for a manager. Inspector is another kind of like security thing, different from advisor. This is like what confused a lot of people. I feel like it confused me, I think, sometimes at the beginning. So inspector, automated inspections of network and EC2 instances. So once again, inspector is automated. Advisor is not automated. So this gives security findings for for your security findings there. All right, next one, secrets manager securely stores, encrypts, rotates credentials. So this is, you have something to store, put it in secrets manager. This costs money though. If you don't have money, you go to the parameter store. PS, that's kind of, that's what parameter store initials are, PS. So part of a systems manager, they can store data free, but you can only store a certain number of things. So parameter store is like the free trial. Secrets manager is the paid tier, tier 3 sub thing. But there's no automatic rotation of keys in the parameter store. So you got to do it yourself, which makes sense because it's free tier, right? Or it's not necessarily free tier, but I guess different from the AWS free tier. So pre-signed URLs, something allows you to share objects in S3 buckets that are private and can do through the command line. So there's pre-signed cookies, allows access to multiple files and sites. All right. Next thing, we're almost done here. So there's Amazon resource name. So AWS objects and services sometimes have an ARN. And the way that basically goes, there's the ARN, and then colon partition, colon service, colon region, and then colon account ID. So that probably won't come up, but it might be useful to remember how these resources are named. IAM policies, so once again, more security can be defined to an identity or to a resource. So you can, policies can go to something, identity, someone, or something. Permission boundary, delegates permission to users. So AWS joins all applicable policies. So once again, explicit deny is greater than everything else. So if there's a deny anywhere, then they're not allowed, even if there's an explicit allow, right? The certificate manager. So oftentimes, people get annoyed because they have to manage their certificates. Hard word to say. But certificate manager will do that all for you. So you can create and manage, deploy public and private SSL certificates. So these are free certs. They automatically renew them for you, and it's just easy. AWS Audit Manager, so it produces reports up to auditors. Kind of makes sense. What auditors need, they need reports. AWS Artifacts, this is, you can download compliance reports. This is different than Audit Manager reports, because Audit Manager reports are for automated reports and for internal risk assessment, not necessarily for compliance. All right, VPC peering, so full mesh architecture. There's transit gateway, there's a hub and spoke architecture. So VPC connectivity at scale is this transit gateway. So AWS firewall, I mentioned before, security hub, the single place to see all security alerts. Then you get the manager I mentioned before, or the firewall manager I mentioned before, but the security hub is for security alerts. And that's about it. Let me go see. All right. A couple more things here. So placement groups for EC2 servers. So there's cluster placement groups, spread placement groups, and then there's partition placement groups. The cluster is grouping of instances in an availability zone, while a spread placement group is placed on distinct underlying hardware. So you think of like the servers themselves, they're spread apart these single hardwares. And then there's partition, which each has its own set of racks and power sources. So they're partitioned into power. With both partition and power sources, both start with P. You can remember that. Dedicated hosts can be on demand or reserved. So these have special licensing requirements, and usually this will cost more. Of course, unless you, I guess if it's reserved, it can be, all across the whole year, demand like anytime, right? So spot block. So spot instances from being terminated. Spot block. It stops these instances from being terminated for 1 to 6 hours. So basically, if you have some instances and then someone else buys out the instances from you, it'll stop that for 1 to 6 hours. And to terminate persistent spot instances, you have to first cancel the spot request and then terminate the instance. So another thing to remember here. And you can also get spot fleets. So these match target capacity with price restraints. And that is all the tips I had for you. Of course, there's a lot more on this exam. I've made a lot of videos on AWS Certificate or Solution Architect Associate in the past. Of course, they all probably still hold, There's still, usually they just add on more things to these exams. They don't usually take away knowledge that you need to know. But I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to follow or subscribe to me if you have not already. And I hope you pass this exam. Good luck.